Heartland Flags and Gifts presents Legends and Listeners with Scott Dochterman and Chad Leistikow. Fly 'em high and fly 'em proud. Find your flag at heartlandflags.com. Breaking down the Big Ten from the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Welcome to March Madness and episode 32 of Legends and Listeners here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. We had a few technical difficulties. We're going to see how it goes. I'm hopeful, our internets have all caught up, Scott, but we'll see. It's an adventure when we go live. So anyway, thank you for joining us here on this Tuesday from the Channel Seed Studios. Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. As I mentioned, Scott Dochterman of The Athletic joining me as always. Scott, of course, the Iowa men's team will not be part of the NCAA tournament this year. And Fran McCaffrey's squad kicks off its quest to win the NIT tonight against Kansas State. More on the men later, later on Hawkeye football, which spring practice is snuck up on us. It starts tomorrow, but we won't forget them. But we're going to start with the top seeded Iowa women and their NCAA bracket draw and quest to return to the Final Four, which begins in earnest at 2 p.m. Saturday. Scott, globally speaking, I know there's been a lot of chatter about this Albany 2 draw being a murderer's row, et cetera, but what are your thoughts in general on the draw the Hawkeyes received?
I think, Chad, first you look at everything holistically and you go, wow, this is amazing, because all these teams we've seen Iowa play in recent memory. I mean, the potential Sweet 16 match against Kansas State, who they played twice, which does sound a little weird to me, that they're going to potentially have to play for a third time. Colorado, they played last year in the Sweet 16. Drake, who they play every year. And then, of course, you look at the back end, which would be the Elite Eight matchup, and you've got LSU, which I think will be the match of the millennium if they end up playing them, or UCLA, a tremendous game opportunity there, and Louisville, who they did play in the Elite Eight last year, sans Haley Van Lith. And, of course, Louisville and LSU could be playing in the round of 32, which has got its own flavor to it as well. So, holistically, you look at this and you go, wow, that is just a killer bracket. But then you start to peel it back and you go, you know what? Iowa doesn't have to play all of them. Iowa will play either Kansas State or Colorado or potentially Drake. And then it'll play one of LSU, UCLA, Louisville. So really, it's no different, no more difficult than the other ones. It's just a matter of you're looking at, okay, there's just some teams you're aware of and some history there that makes it sound like it's more difficult.
Yeah, I think in general, the reaction is, oh my God, LSU, this is the super team that Iowa didn't beat last year. And how could they pair them with Iowa? But there's going to be a good team in the Elite Eights at some point. In my opinion, I think you'd rather face LSU than UConn and Albany if you're going to be in Albany. And so, I mean, the team that really got screwed, if you want to say that, it would be UCLA. I mean, UCLA has gone from basically the 1 seed line potentially. Then they lost in the Pac-12 semis to USC in double overtime. I mean, UCLA should have won that game. They were up 4 with a minute to go, and USC got fouled, and they hit the first free throw, missed the second, they hit a 3-pointer to force overtime. So basically a 4-point play. I mean, UCLA ends up going all the way down to the 7th overall seed, and they've got to face LSU just to get to Iowa, and then Iowa potentially. So, I mean, that's a team and they have to travel, I think 3,000 miles almost to Albany so they've really lost out. You could look at a team like Notre Dame. I mean, they got a 2 seed, but your reward is, you're in the South Carolina bracket. Ohio State falls to a 2 seed, and they're with UConn down. I mean, so, it's not, Texas and Stanford are top 4 RPIs, and they're paired at 1-2. So it's all a tough bracket. That's great. The women's game there's much more parity in the women's game than there there has been in a really long time. I can't speak to forever ago, but in my experience, we've gotten to the point now where, you know, eights can beat ones, and fives can beat ones, sixes can beat twos, tens can beat twos. Heck, that happened to Iowa 2 years ago. So a lot of parity in the women's game. You're going to have to beat someone good to get to the Final Four, Scott.
Right. I think the one thing that really kind of passes this or makes it an interesting flavor for Iowa is the LSU part of it. I mean, a team that not only did it beat them in the national title game, but they really, the two schools kind of commanded the offseason in the discussion part of it, whether you have, when you have Angel Reese and you have Caitlin Clark and you have just all these known people, I think that having them in the same bracket or the same regional really kind of, whoa, that looks pretty nasty. I mean, now if LSU was in a different one, I don't think people would have that same reaction. And frankly, I think there are probably 10 teams here that have an opportunity to win the national title. In my eyes, all the ones, all the twos, LSU and UConn. I look at NC State and Oregon State as a step below. And then you look at the fours, they have injury issues. They've had other issues, I think, that kind of pushed them down there. Virginia Tech, I think, would be a team that you might call a sleeper. But without Elizabeth Kitley, who knows what her situation is, they're very susceptible to losing to Baylor, for instance. Gonzaga, is Gonzaga a great team or merely a team that took advantage of a weak schedule to get to a 4 seed? Indiana's had some issues all along the year and been injuries to Mackenzie Holmes and what have you. So, and then Notre Dame, has a significant injury issue. So, but I think that, whether it's Portland Regional 3 with USC, Ohio State, and UConn, or Albany Regional 2 with Iowa, UCLA, and LSU, I think those to me look like the more stacked regionals. But you know what? They're going to be highly competitive. They're going to be entertaining. And Iowa only has to play one of those teams, not both of them.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're looking way ahead here. It's not even going to be necessarily easy to get out of the Iowa City bracket, Scott.
Yeah.
That you got to win 2 games, as Caitlin Clark said the other night after the bracket draw. She's like, basically, after the first game, you're playing a top 25 team at minimum.
Yeah.
From there on out, and you got to win 5 in a row. So I like that analogy to think about it that way. I mean, if you look across, Scott, at some of the 8s and 9s out there, I mean, 7, 8, 9, 10 range, you got, Michigan is a 9. Michigan State, which was highly competitive and almost beat Iowa and Carver, is a 9. Iowa State is a 7. Maryland is a 10. Nebraska is a 6. We saw Iowa to the wire. Like Creighton's a 7. These are good programs, good teams. Viable teams. And this West Virginia Princeton matchup, Scott, I know you've looked into it a little bit more, and that could be scary for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, I think both teams have the opportunity to really impose their will at Iowa. If Iowa gets careless, misses shots, is sloppy with the ball, then it could be a real dangerous type of game. I mean, you look at West Virginia, they were 12-6 in the Big 12. They lost 2 games to Iowa State and 2 to Kansas State, so they are a step down, but Kansas State beat Iowa. Iowa State, and then of course Iowa won the rematch. And Iowa State was a challenge for the Hawkeyes on the road. They have the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year in J.J. Quinterly. They have Jordan Harrison, who is also on the Big 12's all defensive team. They have 3 guards that are really good, and they average about 70, almost 75 points a game. The one thing that I thought was most interesting was their top 5 scorers are guards, and only one forward averaged more than 15 minutes a game. So the deficiencies that Iowa may have in an opponent like West Virginia, size or whatever, is mitigated by the fact that they run a similar type of personnel on the court. Princeton, of course, is a slowdown team. They allow only 51 points a game, and they have the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year in the Ivy League, and you look at some of their games and how they did. They only lost by 3 to UCLA. They beat Oklahoma. They lost by 9 to Indiana. So they're a very competitive team, and their best player is Caitlin Chen. So we've got Caitlin Chen and we've got Caitlin Clark, going head to head here. So these are very good teams. However, you also look at it on the flip side is if Iowa plays its game, Iowa will blow either team out of the water. Iowa is that good. Iowa's at home. Iowa has all those advantages, and both of them now. Princeton has 1-6-1 type of forward, probably similar in size, I suppose, to Hannah Stolke. Not similar in style. I think again, Iowa matches up really well with these teams. It's just to be a matter of can Iowa play its game, because if it's sloppy, throws the ball away, then you could be in a scrap for 40 minutes.
Right. So it won't be easy. JJ Quinterly of West Virginia is the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. She's a guard, but she's 5'8". Caitlin Clark is 6 foot tall. Yeah. So, that is a huge advantage for Caitlin, because a story I wrote last year during the Final Four run was like, how is she so unstoppable? And one of the reasons is the only people quick enough to handle her are shorter than her. So she's so smart at using her size when she needs to. She's smart about using her quickness when she needs to. So unless you can find, somebody 6'1" with equal speed to Caitlin Clark, I like her chances to kind of win that matchup, so to speak. I mean, you're going to take Caitlin every time, Iowa's Caitlin, but still, like you said, tense matchup. We've seen Caitlin have off shooting games, including twice in the Big Ten tournament. She was very cold from 3 against Penn State and Nebraska. So it can happen. They were 5 for 28 from 3 against Indiana not that long ago over in Bloomington from 3 and lost that game. That's a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. So it can happen. But the good news is, Scott, Iowa is battle tested. That's probably that's something I'm writing for later in the week. But this team is it's been through it all, basically, from COVID to losing in the second round 2 years ago to going all the way to every arena spotlight you can imagine, all the pressure. That's what I really am encouraged about with the gauntlet that Iowa's about to face. Like when they get to LSU, I don't think they're going to be scared by the moment. They've seen everything at this point.
By the end of this weekend, 34 out of their 36 games were sellouts. Some were in, of course, a lot of them are at home, but some were in arenas where they felt like the home team, and they were clearly the second favorite team of the crowd, in Indiana, for instance, and a few others. And they've been able to handle those situations. They've lost in a few, but good teams lose. So they're not going to be intimidated by the moment. They went to the national title game last year. They played good teams. They played South Carolina last year and won. They've played good teams this year and won. And they've played good teams and lost too. So they've been through that. They understand what they deal with. But I don't think pressure is something that will affect them the way it would another team. I mean, because they've dealt with it and they're battle tested. It's really about them. And I think that's a good position to be in, at least for a while. What Iowa does on the floor will determine whether they win or lose. It's not the stakes are this or whatever. At home, they should be fine. If they play their game, they'll be fine. At Albany, they could play Kansas State for the third time this year, 4th time in the last 2 years, which is crazy. Colorado, they played last year at the same level. Colorado beat LSU to start the season. Those are good teams capable of beating Iowa. However, I'll flip it around and say Iowa's capable of beating them too. Iowa's just as good, if not better, than they are, and they have the best player on the floor. And any time when you start to overanalyze, and we do this in every sport and every team we cover, we start to highlight the negatives and analyze the positives for the other team. It comes back to, but Iowa's pretty freaking good too, and they got number 22. Nobody else has 22. And 22 could do something that nobody else can do, which is everything. So in that regard, I like Iowa. I'm the only one out of the athletic group. We did our Final Four picks. I'm the only one to pick Iowa to go to the Final Four out of this group. And I still think with Caitlin Clark, she always has that little bit of a chip on her shoulder and that swagger. Yeah, I mean, nobody thinks she's going to get there. They're going to win. They're going to go. They're going to be the team to beat again.
Well, if you're a loyal listener to the show and have not supported Heartland Flags and Gifts, what are you doing? Heartland Flags and Gifts has everything you need and can produce and has produced nearly every sport, every team, and every flag. That includes your high school team, too, if you're a booster club. Just go out and ask them. They can put it together for you, and they offer free shipping anywhere in the U.S., so just a phone call away. Visit them online at heartlandflags.com, or better yet, in store at 3719 Southwest 9th Street in Des Moines. I do want to get to our Final Four picks, so we might as well now before we skip ahead to some of the Big Ten talk. This is a Big Ten show, after all. We're going to look at some of the Big Ten teams. My Final Four, Scott, includes South Carolina. And honestly, before I get any further, I don't think they're invincible. I mean, they replaced 5 starters from last year, basically, and this isn't even like the UConn men. This is like, they're undefeated, but I feel like they're just being viewed as some invincible juggernaut. Last year's team was loaded. It had Aaliyah Boston and tons of other pieces. They're a lot newer this year. They're really good. No one's beating them, but they really haven't faced the same kind of gauntlet that a lot of these other teams have faced. I mean, the SEC, very top heavy in my opinion. And so, they've done what they can. I still have them going just because I think the draw favors them. Texas, I have coming out of that region as the 1 seed, a little bit of chalk there, but that's going to be interesting between Texas and Stanford. UConn, I have as a 3 seed coming out of the USC, the Portland 3 regional. And I have Iowa. So I have Iowa facing UConn in the national semifinals, which would be pretty awesome. That would be super fun to cover. And then you got South Carolina and Texas, or South Carolina, Stanford in the other.
Chad, this is sad because we have the same Final Four.
Oh, we did.
And that's what I did on Sunday night is, we went through all these questions, and here we are. We can't even argue. We can't even debate.
All right, let's have an argument.
All right. Well,
what's the most questionable pick there?
Okay, it's probably. I think first you look at South Carolina. Let's just analyze it. That it's advantageous in a couple of ways. One, Indiana is not completely healthy. 2, Notre Dame is not healthy, even though they got Hannah Hidalgo, who's one of the best players in the country. And Nebraska, to me, might be one team that could break through and maybe even get to the second weekend and beyond. I think Iowa is one that most people have not picked, at least at the Athletic. They did not pick. UCLA may be the better team out of all of them, for that matter. That's something we'll find out. And then I picked UConn because there's something about the Paige Bucher story that I really want to see, because she and Caitlin both were the super freshmen. Remember they played in the Sweet 16 their freshman year, and they're co-freshman of the year nationally. And Caitlin Starr continued to rise. Paige Bucher's had it kind of interrupted by some injuries. I think they're capable of doing that. I also wanted to shut down Ohio State. They had a really bad week when they got beat by Iowa, and they got thrashed by Maryland. But they've played well this year. They've got some Cody McMahon, and their backcourt is terrific. And then finally, Stanford and Texas. That is a coin flip. There was a coin flip over who's going to be number 1 out of those two, and now it's a coin flip over who's going to win. The way Texas played in the Big 12 tournament really pushed it forward for me. But I don't see anybody else in that region giving either team much of a problem, except for maybe the Iowa State Maryland winner, because that's the most interesting matchup to me, is the winner that gets to play Stanford. And when you've got Bill Fennelly and you've got Brenda Freeze, and you've got, hey, who's Stacey Freeze going to root for, by the way? And, 2 teams that were really young, rebuilding, and came on strong at the end of the season, and now we're in the tournament. And whoever wins that game, I don't know if they'll beat Stanford, but man, they'll throw down. And Cameron Brink versus Audie Crooks, that's an interesting matchup because they're completely different styles of players. So anyway, I think this is a really intriguing tournament.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 7 Big Ten teams get in. 3 of them are in South Carolina's Albany 1 bracket. So that's could be unfortunate. Maybe not. It'll be an interesting test. I mean, Michigan State's a 9 in that bracket. What's interesting to me, Scott, are the 4 and 6 seeds in Albany 1, which would be Indiana.
Right.
That's a pretty good 4 seed because they would have been higher probably if not for Mackenzie Holmes's knee injury. And from what I read yesterday, she said she's feeling better than she did last March because it's the same knee that's kind of given her troubles. So I think getting that time off, basically playing, a handful of minutes in the Big Ten tournament, hopefully for her has helped her. And I think that would be a super intriguing Sweet 16 game if she's healthy. Terry Morin's a really good coach. I would love to see what the spread is on a South Carolina Indiana type game. I'd probably be inclined to take the Hoosiers just because Holmes is the type of player that she's a tough player. She's a good player. She's a tough player down low. She's not going to take crap from anybody. And in Indiana will give them all that they got. So I'm curious about that. And then of course, Nebraska is the 6th seed in that region as well. Maybe they come out of the bottom. I don't put that past. I mean, I thought that was a really good team, a team that's peaking at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. The way they played in Minneapolis, 4 games in 4 days. I mean, 4.5 and a little change for the overtime and the conclusion. I mean, that's a team that you just don't really want to play because, Alexis Markowski was terrific. Natalie Potts is terrific. Jazz Shelley had a tremendous tournament. They've got really good players. They fight. They should have a lot of confidence because they were really good at the end of the year. And then you look at Notre Dame's injuries now. Hannah Hidalgo, is a tremendous player, but I don't know that with the injuries in interior and an ACL this week, I don't know if that gets them. I mean, if I'm Nebraska, you feel like you got a really good shot there too. You've been battle tested. You've played Iowa 3 times and basically, got blown out once, won once, and then, just lost an overtime game. You feel like, yeah, we can compete with anybody. I like what you said about Indiana. If Terry Moran probably should have just shut down Mackenzie Holmes to begin with. I don't know why they brought her in. I mean, for the Big Ten tournament, it's important, but it's not that important. This is what's most important. And so I'm hopeful she's healthy. She seems like a really, likable person as well. And Sydney Parrish is a great player. She's had her injuries this year. Last year was a disappointing series for them. They lost to Miami. I think it was in the Sweet 16.
No, that was in this.
It was at home. Yeah, it was at home. So that was really disappointing for them. I think, and Michigan State. One thing about them is, they're dogged. They're tough. They can shoot. So I'm not predicting by any stretch of the imagination they beat South Carolina, but I'm saying that if they get past North Carolina, and then of course North Carolina, South Carolina would be kind of a fun matchup in its own right. But Michigan State could do some damage too. So, South Carolina obviously has played the best out of anybody. They haven't lost. They've come close. They still haven't done it. But, they're going to have a few little challenges. And then, of course, when they get to the Final Four, watch out because the other teams have been through a lot bigger battles than they have.
Yeah, South Carolina, not that far-fetched, could face Big Ten to get to the Final Four in Michigan State, Indiana. And I really think Nebraska, I don't know what the odds are to make the Elite 8, but I like Nebraska to maybe, get past Oregon State and then possibly Notre Dame. I just think that's a good team. And Jazz Shelley really, really impressed me. I thought she was phenomenal at the Big Ten tournament. The other Big Ten teams, Scott, you got your eye on anyone else? We talked a little bit about Maryland. Ohio State, I guess, being the 2 and Portland 3. That's another intriguing one. They're in the USC region. So,
Yeah.
That's Portland 3. So it's, if for some reason Ohio State got to the Final Four, we'd have round 3 of Iowa-Ohio State potentially.
Yeah, I mean, UConn and Ohio State will be an interesting matchup because they played last year in the tournament, and I think both are really good teams. So we'll see what Ohio State can do. And Ohio State kind of had a rough ending to the season, but overall, sometimes that's the wake up call that you need. It's like, okay, you get blasted out of the water by Maryland. That was not what they expected. They thought that they were going to float through and play Iowa and win. But Maryland, again, with Brenda Freese, she's the type of coach that you just can't rule out in any game. And I think the same thing with Bill Fennelly for that matter. I mean, I think both these teams are ascending at the right time. That one to me is a 50-50 matchup. I don't know that I would want to take any bet unless somebody says, yeah, you can have Iowa State plus 10 or Maryland plus 10. I'd probably take it. But overall, I think UConn's a little bit better than Ohio State. I think USC is probably is better than Ohio State. UConn and USC, you've got probably the two best players next year in the sport, Juju Watkins and Paige Bucher. So, and I'd love to say that Virginia Tech, the 4 seed in that Portland R3, has got a chance. But, Elizabeth Kitley is phenomenal center, and Georgia Moore is terrific too, Moore. But if Kitley can't play very well or be effective, then I don't even know if they beat Baylor, which is a 5 seed. They're a pretty good team too.
Well, speaking of betting, Scott, DRF Sportsbook is the official sportsbook of Iowa Everywhere and Legends and Listeners, and they're only open in Iowa, which is pretty cool. You can't, they're local. They have a local special right now where you can take. This is kind of interesting. You can take either the Iowa women or Iowa State men. So if either one hits to win the national title, you can get that at plus 500 right now at DRF. So new customers get up to a $250 deposit match plus a $25 bet credit. There's still time to sign up for that before the games begin on the DRF Sportsbook app. I've been scouring Final Four odds across a lot of sports books on the men's side. And what my favorite bet right now on DRF is taking Creighton at plus 500 to make the Final Four. That gives you 5-1 odds. That's a region with Purdue, Tennessee, Kansas, some other teams that are kind of vulnerable. And I think Creighton's pretty well coached, battle tested. Mm-hmm. And if you look at their KenPom metrics, they've got good offense and good defense, and that's what you need. So speaking of men's basketball, Scott, let's transition to the Iowa men's team and very briefly talk about the Big Ten men's tournament, which we previewed, and it went awfully quick for the Hawks. Mm-hmm. We kind of said going into that, if Iowa wins 2, they're probably in, unless there are some bid stealers. As it turned out, they won 0, and they might have needed to win at least 3 up in Minneapolis, and that might have even only gotten them to Dayton, if that, because there were a lot of bid stealers, bid thieves, conference tournament champions you didn't expect. So I don't know. In a way, Scott, it almost seems like it would have really sucked if they won a couple and then were left out.
Right. That would have been the story of Sunday here locally, even over the women getting a 1 seed for the first time in 32 years, is that the men didn't get in despite beating Ohio State and Illinois, for instance, and either Illinois game that they would have had to play or did play. And so it turned out that there was no drama here. It was all gone, and Fran knew it too. Everybody knew it. So, but the same old issues crept up in that Ohio State game. Terrible defense. It was just brutal. And I know he was upset with the officiating and how they handled, manhandled Peyton Sanford on the floor. I understand that, but I also look at it and go, you gave up your first 5 threes, 8 out of 11 to Ohio State in the first half. There were inbound plays where there was no defense. I mean, it's just, you can't win like that. You gave up 90 points, and I understand it's an offensive based team, but man, that was too much. Now they're playing tonight, so our shelf life on the Iowa discussion is fairly short. I think it could go either way with Kansas State at home. NIT is very unpredictable. It's kind of like bowl season where you question motivation. I'm glad Iowa's playing. I think it's the right move. I don't like that these teams have opted out. I understand the disappointment, but I also think that they need to have perspective that you can improve your team, give them a chance to continue to play. For some of those players, their last game will come in the NIT. And I know that there's, the portal is a big deal right now. So what? You're basketball. You don't have to go out and get 20 players. You're not losing 20 players. So I think that's a cheap way to leave. Now, if you wanted to, if your team wanted to take a vote and they all voted no, then that's fine. But I think to just shrug it off and not play, I think that was a week out for 7 different teams.
Yeah, 7. That's crazy. I mean, just as the competitor part of me would always want to play more games. Like if you canceled our, city men's league tennis tournament, because we didn't perform as well or something, I would be pissed.
Yeah.
I want to get on the court and play again. Like I just lost my match. I want to get out there and make a run, even if it's not against the best players out there or whatever, you want to get out there. I don't want to quit. So I agree. I'm curious. I don't know what to expect. I feel like the Iowa men's team is pretty connected, pretty motivated. So I could see them beating K-State tonight. They're 5.5-point favorite, I believe. I haven't checked for a few hours, but Ken Palm has it as a 5-point game. It's at home. They're the 3 seed. If they win, I guess they play this weekend. Yeah, Utah or UC Irvine. It would be the matchup there. So, these are not great teams, but they're kind of like at Iowa's level. So I don't know. There's not much, no sense previewing the game anymore. What else do you want to talk about with men's hoops?
Oh, I think we got to go to the tournament, Chad. I mean, this is, it's fun. We'll be able to give Iowa, its wake, and get to it next week or the week after, however far it goes. I mean, it'd be cool if it goes to Hinkle Fieldhouse and maybe Todd Licklider's out there and throws.
Is he going to give out the NIT trophy?
Yeah. Wow. This is amazing. You made it to the playoffs. but really, now we're all past that. We're talking NCAA tournament hoops. And the Big Ten's opportunity to finally get a champion. Purdue at number 1 seed going to Indianapolis and then Detroit. It's the red carpet's there for the Boilers, and Matt Painter might be one of the best coaches never to get to the Final Four. Do they finally get there? And that's you said you bet on Creighton, or Creighton had great odds. I think the path is there. They're just going to have to take it. And they've always found a way to stub their toe, or last year was just disastrous, losing to Fairleigh Dickinson in round 1. But I don't know. Purdue is I have them going to the Final Four, Chad, but it's hard to buy into them. It's a different team. I don't know.
I like this Purdue team. I mean, I think they're legit. I'm sure last year was a wake up call. Maybe it's akin to the Iowa women a couple years ago. It's not apples and apples. I realize that, but you kind of have that jarring early exit, and the next year you're not going to let that happen. Maybe there's a tense moment where they have to fight their way out of Indianapolis, and then they start. Maybe the bracket falls apart. They're facing maybe McNeese, or someone like that. Because that's a pretty good team, actually. McNeese, by the way, a sleeper team to beat Gonzaga. The second round matchup, Utah State, TCU. I like Purdue's path. I agree. I have Purdue versus Creighton in my Elite 8 matchup. I'll get to my Final Four picks here in a little bit, but it's crazy, Scott. There has not been a Big Ten champion since the Michigan State Spartans in the year 2000 with Mateen Cleaves, right? That was the Mateen Cleaves. That is unbelievable. That's like a generation.
They've been like Susan Lucci at the final, championship game. I mean, they've lost like 7 or 8 championship games since then. And there have been some really, really good teams that I would pick to win it all if they were playing now. Like if you take like the 2015 Wisconsin team, definitely 2005 Illinois. I thought they were just outstanding, and they lost to North Carolina in the championship. Michigan had some good teams that got to all the way to the end. Indiana did in 2002 and it lost to Maryland. So does Maryland count now? I don't know. So there have been all kinds of really good teams that have gotten there, but the Big Ten needs this because it always just kind of gets laughed at, like, oh, you can't win the national title. But there's really only 2 teams capable of that, Chad. And Purdue's path to me is okay. It's good. Illinois' path is much more difficult. And, going to Omaha on Thursday, I think they've got a chance to get out of that. But then you start to go Iowa State. If they play Iowa State, that defense against Illinois, I think they'll cause Illinois way too many problems. I don't think they advance. Or if they happen to do that, then you're talking about Auburn or UConn. I think both of those teams are outstanding. So I think the only real crack the Big Ten has is Purdue, just based on the way the bracket shapes up.
Yeah, I like Illinois. I mean, I think that's a really good team. I think Terrence Shannon is phenomenal as a player. I've got Illinois going to the Elite Eight against UConn. I think Iowa State's a really good team too. That's a tough bracket. Now that's a really loaded bracket. Auburn is a 4 seed. I mean, if you look at Auburn's metrics, I think they're 4th nationally in KenPom. Let me make sure. Yeah. UConn's 1, Auburn 4, Iowa State 5, Illinois 10. So that your top 4 seeds are top 10 in KenPom. That's tough. That's a tough region. I think UConn actually got a pretty tough draw there. So
yeah, for being the number 1, they really got shafted.
Yeah,
I thought.
Exactly.
And I thought Iowa State did. Frankly, Iowa State is playing as well as anybody, and to be put in with UConn just based on the layout, it's really unfair. I mean, they won. They were a game out in the regular season. They were. They won decisively the Big 12 tournament. I mean, just smothered Houston. And, I don't know if they should have been a number 1 seed, but I guarantee they shouldn't have been where they are. But out of that region, I like Iowa State and Auburn to win, to get to the Elite Eight. And I got the Cyclones going to the Final Four for the first time. I'm sold, man. That defense is legit. That offense is getting better. There's so much to like about the Cyclones and the way they're playing. And in the tournament, we've seen it year after year after year. People undersell defense. They just do. They look at the offensive numbers, and it's like that in football too. But it's like, TJ has them working magic there. But I tell you what, most exciting matchup for me in this tournament would be Drake, Iowa State in the second round, because those 2 teams played every year but one from 1908 to 2013. And then they've only played 3 times since. That you live like halfway between both, or you create like a triangle between Drake's campus, Iowa State, and your house. But I think overall, if they were to play Darren DeVries, I think that's one that Iowa State's like, I don't know if you really want to play that game because you're going to have that rivalry factor, which flexing rivalry muscles. What do you think of some of the other regions, Chad?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, by the way. Drake is favored as a 10 seed over Washington State. So they're favored to get to that Iowa State matchup. I can't wait for that. I hope it's just different than the Iowa first round women's time, because obviously I'll be covering the women as I'm sure you are as well. The rest of the Big Ten, I mean, Northwestern is a 9 seed. They're still banged up. They're in the East. I don't even think they get out of the first round. I don't think Michigan State wins a game. I think they get beat by Mississippi State. They're out west. in the West region, a very winnable region, by the way. That's an interesting one to look at if you're looking at gambling odds. Very balanced region. UNC is the number 1 seed, Arizona the 2. I think there's some you could find some long shots there. Baylor's the 3. Alabama is a 4. They have unimpressive. St. Mary's is the 5. I think you could dig even deeper and find maybe some long shots in that region.
If Auburn and Alabama were flipped, I'd pick Auburn to win that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I feel like they should have flipped them. I don't understand.
I mean, that's just they won the SEC tournament, and they did so decisively. So
and Alabama flamed out of the tournament. So to Florida. Anyway,
right.
So the 2 intriguing Big Ten teams to me, Scott, are in the South because they're both in the top side of the bracket, which is interesting. Nebraska and Wisconsin. And same kind of conversation as we had in the women's bracket. Houston might have to go through the Big Ten twice here. I like Nebraska. I think that's a well-coached team. Fred Hoiberg's a really good coach. He's finally got some guys. And Wisconsin's playing well at the right time. They started the year good, went through a huge lull, which Iowa took advantage of with a win at home. And they're kind of back. They impressed me at the Big Ten tournament. And now that first game against James Madison for Wisconsin, not going to be easy. Duke in the second round, that'll be a tough one. So it's not an easy path for Wisconsin. But I kind of like Nebraska, honestly, to give Houston a run for its money, at least in that second round.
Well, first of all, that would be a historic season if they can win their first NCAA tournament game ever and do it at the price of their former AD, who's at Texas A&M. That's just either fortune or crazy scheduling that Nebraska's got to play Texas A&M in both men's and women's basketball to start the tournament. And Trev Alberts just last week took that job. That's just unbelievable. But and a Texas A&M Houston matchup would be incredible as well, just from the historic ties. They were in the same league for a while. And but I think Nebraska, based on what I saw last week, they were for a game and a half, I mean, they just ripped apart Indiana, and their 3-point shooting was fantastic. And Kaize, I'm struggling with his name, we'll just say he's amazing. And then Tominaga, there you go. And then Wisconsin, James Madison's a team that I've heard some people talking about this and looked it up, and their strength of schedule isn't real good. They've got a great record, but they're like, and I know it's a 5-12, so you've always got that factor, but I think McNeese over Gonzaga is a little more in my wheelhouse. I think Wisconsin, it's with Greg Gard, with Wisconsin, now that they're kind of off their little issue, what you see is what you get again. Wisconsin can win that. Wisconsin can beat Duke. Wisconsin can beat Houston, based on what I saw of Houston against Iowa State. Out of that region, I kind of like Kentucky, though. I think they've got the highest ceiling. They're a team that, Greg Campy could knock them out in game one, or they could go all the way. It's kind of typical of Kentucky, but I think this might be their year to push through. And I think it's a real kind of a jumbled mess. And again, there are 2 to 3 teams, maybe all 4 in the East, with UConn, Auburn, Illinois, and Iowa State, that if they were spread in different regions, I'd probably take them to go really far, if not to the Final Four.
So my Final Four is UConn. I do have them emerging, but I like the odds that you can get with Auburn right now. I think that's the smart odds play. And I have them facing Arizona. I don't love Arizona, but that region, that West region, nobody jumps out to me really there. So I think that one, you could find an upset team in there, as I mentioned. And then the other 2 regions, I have Purdue, and I have Purdue getting to the finals, Scott, and losing in the championship to UConn. But I also have Duke getting there as a 4 seed, just because I think Houston's banged up. So and I think everyone's overlooking Duke just a little bit. So if you look at their metrics, they're pretty good. And the bottom of that bracket doesn't scare me as much. I know you said Kentucky for you, but that's who I got in the Final Four. How about you?
I've got Iowa State getting out of the East against Auburn. I think they're both well-coached teams, obviously. I was just blown away by Iowa State the other day. And, now history should teach me over the years that the Big 12 tournament champion that plays really, really well sometimes doesn't quite translate to the next level. I saw that with Mizzou one time, and I was like, I'm never doing this again. And, of course, I did like the very next year. I like Iowa State, Kentucky, Purdue, and I do think chalk maybe in the West. I think North Carolina might get there. I'm not real sold on anybody. You could sway me if you wanted to on some of these teams. I don't really like the way a lot of the teams played in the season in the West region. I don't like the way Michigan State played. I don't like Clemson, the way it played. And Dayton didn't win its conference tournament, and it wasn't really good, really for the most part. So it was just, I got the Tar Heels advancing along with Purdue. But the championship game, I've got Kentucky beating Iowa State. So I think Iowa State. Yeah,
does Ashley Judd still go to the games?
She will now. Okay. I think it's the Final Four. I covered the Final Four when they got beat by Wisconsin when they were undefeated, and that was a juggernaut team, and that was pretty impressive. But how fun would that be for Cyclone fans to get to the championship, Chad? And that would not be as much fun for Iowa fans unless the women get there at the same time, so they can say, "Well, we don't care."
Yeah. Well, hey, if you like those picks, grab that DRF Sportsbook prop that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, fun stuff. I love this time of year. I'm trying to work ahead so that I have Thursday. My one day off this week is going to be Thursday. That's my goal. We're going to see if it happens, so I can watch some games. That'd be fun. Want to thank our friends at Steeple Ridge Bourbon for their support of Legends and Listeners. Steeple Ridge delivers a high-quality, delicious drinking, award-winning craft bourbon. The Steeple Ridge Single Barrel is matured inside small, charred American white oak barrels and offers notes of cherry, vanilla, toffee, and a touch of nuttiness that rounds out the finish. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer, ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge, distilled, aged, and bottled in Erling, Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. So another local company here on Iowa Everywhere. Let's move to spring football, Scott. I know you covered Pro Day on Monday. I was not there. I'm focused on some women's articles this week. So give me one takeaway out of Pro Day.
Well, I'll splice it then. I was going to give you two, but one.
Give me two.
All right. Cooper DeJean, he will work out April 15th for pro teams, and it makes sense. I mean, you got to push that back a few more weeks. He started running full speed right before Indianapolis. If he was to run now and he ran a 4.58, and then in 3 weeks if he could run a 4.42, that's big money right there. That 4.48 is, we can't play him at corner, versus 4.42. We'll play him at corner and he'll be a Pro Bowler. And it's perception more than anything. Secondly, Joe Evans, off the charts performance, 41.5 vert. That's incredible. Amazing vertical. Also working out at fullback. It has been for a little while. And he said it's about 50-50 on teams wanting him to stay at edge or go to fullback. I think that was, so he's got the build for it. He's got the athletic ability for it. The desire is off the charts. We know that. So I think it's an interesting move for him. Parker Hesse flipped over and did tight end. Joe's a better athlete than Parker was. Parker is try hard just like Joe. So I think if Joe does make that move and that's where he ends up, he might stick for a while if he's healthy. He's a pretty good player, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's like, use check. Maybe his wife will design some coats here in the future. I don't know, when he has wife.
That's funny. Yeah, Joe Evans. I mean, gosh, talk about like the ultimate, maybe the ultimate developmental Iowa football story. He's definitely one of them, probably at least in the top 5, right? The favorites era. I mean,
he's
from
got
nothing to fourth all time in sacks in the program.
Yeah, 29 sacks, and Kirk you can't shake him off the Dallas Clark story.
No, Dallas Clark will be one.
That's what when he's 90 and he won't remember where he lives, he'll remember Dallas Clark. That'll be Kirk's thing. Just like with Dallas Clark, Dallas is now 40 something probably.
Yeah.
But with
Jovan Johnson.
And Jovan Johnson, of course. Ask him about any cornerback, he'll keep reverting to Jovan. But with Joe, man, he talk about starting at nothing. Walk on quarterback, flipping to linebacker, moving to defensive end, beating out some veterans, beating out some scholarship guys to be the stand-up rush guy, and then, of course, being a starter at his size to go up again, play a heavy 5 technique and really battle offensive tackles and still have a great career. The ultimate warrior story for Iowa. So I think he gets a crack at it. But, none of them are going to be on the field tomorrow, and Iowa football will be. And that's going to be fascinating because this is the first time I can remember Iowa football entering spring ball where they are completely a footnote at this point. Whether it's women's basketball, there's no Brian Ferentz complaining, so that took a lot of people out. The complainers like to come out and they can't complain yet about football. So I think overall they're just kind of sitting back and they're probably like, hey, we can just do this in peace. And, I'm sure that's Kirk's preference anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny. My sports editor reached out to me yesterday just to kind of talk about the week. And it was like, are you going to write anything about football this week? And I was like, God, I totally forgot about it.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I guess not, unless you really want me to. I'm kind of knee deep in the women's basketball. He's like, no, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure. So yeah, this is probably the first time I've never written a spring football preview column. I'm sorry. I'm focused on the basketball right now. This is a generational story right now with the women, but we're going to talk about it a little bit here. We decided we're going to pick 2 storylines each, talk about them for like a minute and just kind of leave it. And we'll talk to Kirk next Tuesday and we'll get you more then. But let's do 2 each. I get to start since you did the pro day. I'm going to start with quarterback. That's going to be my curiosity. Will new offensive coordinator Tim Lester hand the spring keys to Marco Lainez? I think he will, over Deacon Hill. Or will Iowa fans have something to be mad about when Deacon Hill comes out as number 1 on the depth chart with I guess I don't know if they put Cade McNamara 1, but obviously he's 1, but he's not going to do much this spring. How much can they fast track Lainez? I think that's a massive storyline this spring because if he doesn't look good this spring, you have to go portaling in May or April or whatever. You have to. Mm-hmm. You can't go into the season with McNamara and nothing else. You saw how that worked out last year.
Yeah, I think they do anyway. I honestly do. I think they'll go portaling no matter if Marco looks the part or not. No, that's good. And my first takeaway is along those same lines, which is schematics with the offensive coordinator. I mean, what kind of offense will Tim Lester unveil? How much will he show? How much will they show off? I'm really intrigued by that because, I talked to a couple of people who knew him in Indianapolis, and they said that his year with Green Bay and working with tight ends impacted some of his philosophy, and that's what he was able to kind of sell to Kirk Ferentz to get that job. How much he's invested in 12 personnel and then 2 tight ends, and I think that's going to be really important. But how does he utilize them? How does he utilize the passing game? I want to see that as much as anything when we're starting to talk about going forward in the, with Iowa's offense, because it's obvious schematics were a major issue the last couple of years. Is not as much as personnel, but it certainly did not help them. And I want to see what kind of changes are there because, Iowa's going to need to see some major strides by its receivers, and Scheme's going to have to scheme them open.
Yeah, can't wait to hear from Tim Lester at some point this spring. We will, I'm sure. See how things are going. What are they going to do? How are they going to move the football? I think we both think there's going to be a lot of 12 personnel, but gotta hear it. I want to hear from him. I want to see what they've landed on. I want to see with our own eyes what they're running, and hopefully we get a chance to do that at some point. I don't know. I hate to stay on offense, Scott, here, but got to go with Caden Proctor, right? I mean, one of the biggest story, literally and figuratively, perhaps this spring. I mean, is he, a plug and play? Is he looking great? Has he got a ways to go to learn the Iowa schemes, et cetera? And then what does that offensive line look like, assuming he is in there? If he's assuming he's happy, everything like that. I mean, there's a lot of Caden Proctor to unpack this spring for me in terms of performance, the fit, what it does for everybody else. It's very, very intriguing. It's very exciting and very intriguing in terms of how good this offense can be.
Yeah, and the ripple effect. If he's a left tackle, he's not going to play any other position besides left tackle. That's what they wanted him at. That's what they recruited him at. And of course, even when they spurned him, and it set him back last year because they didn't really want to start looking in the portal, and they were fearful of him picking Bama or, for that matter, Oregon. And then to go through that is just crazy. But I think for me that maybe the other one is we can't really overlook defensive line. They've had some issues. There's some losses there. Noah Shannon didn't play, but he's gone. You have Joe Evans, and he's gone. Who can kind of step up on the defensive line? Deontay Craig is back and Y.A. Black is back. But, does Aaron Graves step right in there for Logan Lee and become that guy? Who's becomes the, is it, kid from Xavier? I'm struggling with his name. I'm trying to keep track of him. Had the interception against Nebraska.
Ethan Hurkett.
Yeah, Ethan Hurkett.
I was on mute. I was going to jump in, but I couldn't find the mute button. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and I couldn't find my brain here. But Ethan Hurkett, does he just seamlessly step in as the fourth starter at defensive end? Yes, but who else kind of emerges there? Because one thing that has really elevated Iowa's play, and really in the last 4 to 5 years on defense, they've been as good as they've ever been, is defensive line rotation and players moving in. Who's going to be that next guy? Will a Brian Allen emerge? And so I want to see that, because they're set in the linebacker. They're set pretty much in the secondary. Placing Cooper DeJean is going to be tough, but they had to do it anyway. And by the way, ESPN and the CFP finalized their agreement through 2032 for the playoff. But the secondary is going to be fine. It's just going to be, can they get 8 players up front to play the way they want to play? If they can, then this defense is going to be even better than it was last year.
That must be what it's like to be a Jeopardy contestant. Like, you want to get in, but you can't you can't get the button in time. Pushing. I couldn't get myself unmuted in time. Ethan Hurkett.
Yeah.
So what's before we go? What's the CFP agreement? I'm trying to call it up here. Is it still 12 teams, or is it 14?
Well, the format is. The format is still going to be yet to be determined, but it's
okay.
Yeah,
that's all I cared about. I didn't care about the money or whatever. But,
yeah,
all right.
the money, but they retain all rights. They can sublease games, which is probably what they'll do, is like sell a early playoff game.
Yeah, to like Amazon or something.
Yeah, or somebody. So
yeah, okay,
yeah, and then Friday we've got Pat McAfee on Friday. So
City. Yeah. I haven't been asked on again. I mean, maybe they didn't like my appearance on it. No, that'll be fun. I'll probably go to the women's availability though instead. But still, very cool. Pat McAfee coming. Everybody, the stars are coming out, and we got Indiana Fever credential information today in our inboxes. If there's any doubt,
exactly
where the number 1 pick is going to go. Come April 15th. So anyway, good show, Scott. Long one, I know.
Yeah, sounds good, man. So here we are. I was just going to say, here we are. March Madness is upon us, and we're getting ready for some crazy times.
All right, for Scott Dochterman, Chad Leistikow here to thank you for joining us on Legends and Listeners from the Channel Seed Studios. Next week's show, we'll figure it out depending on where things stand with the NCAA tournaments. We'll keep you posted. Talk to you next week here on Iowa Everywhere.